October 14, 1948, 11:32 p.m. The Well Supper Club, 2049 7th Avenue. The air tasted like stale cigarette smoke and impending death. A bead of sweat, cold and treacherous, rolled down Giovanni the butcher Rossi's temple. He stared at the crystal tumbler sitting on the white tablecloth. $50,000 of heroin sat in the trunk of his Packard outside, but right now, that money meant nothing. The only thing that mattered was the amber liquid swirling in the glass. It was supposed to be the end of Nat Pettigrew, Bumpy Johnson's oldest friend. Instead, the glass had been pushed back across the mahogany table. Bumpy Johnson sat opposite him. He didn't blink. He didn't shout. He simply adjusted his cufflinks. "Drink it," Bumpy whispered. The sound cut through the jazz band's brass like a razor through silk. Rossi looked around. His two bodyguards were slumped in the corner booth, eyes open, seeing nothing. The exits were blocked by shadows and fedoras. "I said, drink it, Gio," Bumpy repeated, his voice devoid of mercy. "To friendship." Rossi's hand shook as he reached for the glass. He knew exactly what was in it. Arsenic trioxide. Enough to strip the lining of a man's stomach in 3 minutes flat. He looked at Bumpy, pleading with his eyes. Bumpy just smiled, a terrifying, shark-like expression that promised no salvation. "Bottoms up," Bumpy said. 3 weeks earlier, Harlem was a powder keg, and Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson was the man sitting on the detonator. By 1948, Bumpy wasn't just a gangster. He was the unauthorized mayor of Harlem. From 110th Street to the Polo Grounds, nothing moved without his permission. He was a paradox wrapped in a tailored suit, a man who played chess with professors during the day and ordered hits with a nod of his head at night. He protected the neighborhood from the Italian families downtown who saw Harlem merely as a cash cow for numbers and dope. But heavy is the head that wears the crown, and Bumpy's crown was forged in blood. The autumn of '48 was particularly volatile. The five families were getting greedy. The post-war economic boom had flooded New York with cash, and the Genovese crime family wanted a bigger slice of the uptown numbers racket. The truce established by Lucky Luciano years prior was fraying at the edges. Tensions crackled in the air like static electricity before a thunderstorm. Every street corner from 125th to 135th felt the pressure. The police were being squeezed by the district attorney to crack down, while the mob was squeezing the police to look the other way. In the middle of this geopolitical war stood Nat Pettigrew. Nat wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a killer. He was a jazz pianist with a gentle soul and a gambling addiction that made him a liability. But to Bumpy, Nat was family. They had grown up running the streets of Charleston together before the migration north. Nat was the one human tether keeping Bumpy connected to his own humanity. Bumpy paid Nat's debts, kept him in clean suits, and ensured he had gigs at the Lenox Lounge. The Italians knew this. They saw the weakness. If you can't kill the king because he's too well guarded, you kill the jester he loves. It was a cowardly strategy, born of desperation. The downtown bosses needed to send a message that Bumpy couldn't protect his own. They needed to break his spirit before they could break his empire. They underestimated the ferocity of the man they were provoking. The instrument of this provocation was Giovanni the butcher Rossi, a mid-level capo for the Genovese family. Rossi had earned his nickname not in a meat market, but in a warehouse in Brooklyn. He was a brute with delusions of grandeur, known for using a cleaver to dispose of witnesses. He had climbed the ranks by being willing to do the dirty work that made other men vomit. In 1946 alone, Rossi was linked to 6 disappearances along the waterfront. He was ambitious, cruel, and crucially, he lacked the strategic intelligence of the old-school dons. Rossi wanted Harlem. Specifically, he wanted the distribution rights for the heroin flooding into the ports. Bumpy had blocked him at every turn, refusing to let the heavy stuff destroy the community he ruled. "We sell hope in numbers," Bumpy had told a Genovese associate, "not death in needles." This moral stance, hypocritical as it might have seemed to outsiders, cost the Italians millions. Rossi took it personally. He saw Bumpy's refusal not as a business decision, but as an insult from a man he considered inferior. Rossi was dangerous because he was reckless. He had the backing of a faction within the Genovese family that was tired of negotiating with Harlem. He commanded a crew of 12 hard-nosed enforcers and had access to the family's deep pockets for bribes. He walked around with a sense of invincibility, protected by the omertà and the fear he inspired. The ultimatum came in the form of a dead canary left on Nat Pettigrew's piano bench at Small's Paradise. A note attached read, "Sing for us, or don't sing at all." It was a direct threat. Give up the distribution routes, or the pianist dies. Bumpy tore the note into confetti. He didn't send a reply. Silence in Bumpy's world was the loudest warning shot of all. But Rossi, blinded by greed and ego, mistook silence for hesitation. He decided to escalate. October 14th. 11:15 p.m. The Wells Supper Club was famous for its chicken and waffles, a late-night haven for musicians and night owls. The aroma of fried chicken and sweet syrup usually comforted the soul. But tonight, the air was thick with tension. Rossi had arranged a peace meeting. He invited Nat Pettigrew, claiming he wanted to apologize for the canary incident and offer him a lucrative residency at a downtown club. It was the classic bait. Bumpy wasn't invited, but Rossi knew Bumpy wouldn't let Nat go alone. That was the plan. Poison Nat in front of Bumpy, a helpless display of power, then gun Bumpy down in the ensuing chaos. The lighting in Wells was low amber hues reflecting off the brass instruments on the small stage where a trio played a mournful blues set. Smoke curled from ashtrays on the white linen tablecloths. Table 4, a corner booth near the kitchen, was set for 3. Rossi sat facing the door, his back to the wall. He wore a pinstriped suit that cost more than most Harlem residents made in a year. 11:25 p.m. Nat Pettigrew arrived looking nervous. He clutched his hat in his hands. Bumpy walked in a step behind him, moving with the silent grace of a panther. The room didn't go silent. That would be too obvious, but the temperature dropped. Patrons at nearby tables, recognizing the godfather of Harlem, suddenly found their plates very interesting. "Gentlemen," Rossi smiled, his teeth too white, too sharp. "Please, sit." 11:28 p.m. The waiter, a man named Silas who had worked at Wells for 20 years, brought a bottle of expensive scotch and 3 glasses. Rossi poured. He was careful. He poured his own drink first, then Bumpy's. Then, with a slight sleight of hand, a ring on his pinky finger containing a small reservoir, he tapped the rim of the 3rd glass before pouring Nat's drink. The arsenic dissolved instantly. "To new beginnings," Rossi toasted, lifting his glass. 11:30 p.m. Nat reached for his drink. Bumpy's hand shot out, clamping over Nat's wrist. The contact was audible. Smack. "Wait," Bumpy said softly. The jazz trio stopped playing. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. You could hear the scratch of a match lighting a cigarette 3 tables away. "What's the matter, Bumpy? Don't trust me," Rossi sneered, though his eyes darted to his men by the door. 11:31 p.m. Bumpy didn't look at Rossi. He looked at the glass. Then he looked at Nat. "Go to the car, Nat," Bumpy said. Now it was just the two of them, Rossi and Bumpy, the predator and the apex predator. Bumpy picked up Nat's glass. He swirled the liquid. The amber fluid caught the dim light. "You think I don't know the smell of almonds, Gio?" Bumpy asked. "I don't know what you're talking about," Rossi stammered. The sweat bead began to form. 11:32 p.m. Bumpy placed the glass in front of Rossi. "Drink it." Rossi signaled to his men. He looked toward the door. Nothing happened. He looked toward the bar where his other shooters were stationed. They were gone, replaced by 2 massive men in dark coats, Red Dillard, and one of Bumpy's toughest enforcers, a man known simply as the Giant. The trap had snapped shut, but not on the mouse. It had caught the cat. What Rossi didn't know was that Bumpy Johnson owned the very ground Rossi walked on. 3 days prior, Bumpy had intercepted a call. A switchboard operator at the Hotel Teresa on Bumpy's payroll for exactly this reason had listened to Rossi ordering the specific poison from a chemist in New Jersey. Bumpy knew the time, the place, and the method. Bumpy had spent the last 48 hours dismantling Rossi's safety net. October 12th, Bumpy met with the Capo with the Genovese family in a quiet park in Queens. He brought photos of Rossi skimming off the top of the collection envelopes. He offered the Italians a choice. "Let me handle your garbage, or I stop the numbers running for a month." The Genovese Capo, pragmatic and greedy, gave Bumpy the green light. Rossi was already a dead man. He just didn't know it. October 14th, 10:10 p.m. While Rossi was dressing for dinner, Bumpy's men were quietly disarming Rossi's backup. The waiter, Silas, he was Bumpy's cousin by marriage. The poison ring Rossi used? Silas had swapped the glasses before they even reached the table. confusing the setup so thoroughly that Rossi had to improvise, making him sloppy. But the real twist was the bottle itself. "You switched the glasses," Rossi hissed, his voice trembling. "I didn't have to," Bumpy replied, leaning back. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small glass vial. It was empty. He set it on the table next to the untouched scotch. "I replaced your men an hour ago, Gio. Those two by the door, they work for me. The car outside, my driver has the keys. You're alone, completely alone." Bumpy picked up the empty vial and crushed it in his hand, ignoring the shards of glass biting into his palm. He didn't flinch. "You tried to kill a man who plays piano, a man who never hurt a fly. That's a sin, Gio, and tonight you're gonna do penance." Bumpy slid the poisoned glass closer to Rossi. "Your bosses downtown authorize this. They consider you a liability. If you walk out that door, my men kill you. If you stay here, you drink. At least this way, you choose the time." October 14th, 11:38 p.m. Rossi looked at the glass. He looked at the gun bulge in Bumpy's jacket. He realized with a sickening thud that the stories were true. Bumpy Johnson wasn't just a gangster, he was a force of nature. Tears welled in Rossi's eyes. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the primal fear of a trapped animal. "Please," Rossi whispered. "Bumpy, please, I'll leave town. I'll go to Vegas." "The drink, Gio," Bumpy said, his voice flat. With a sob that embarrassed everyone in the room, Giovanni Rossi lifted the glass. His hand shook so violently that liquor splashed onto his expensive tie. He squeezed his eyes shut and threw the liquid back. He gagged. He coughed. He clutched his throat, waiting for the fire, waiting for the end. He waited and waited. 11:40 p.m. Nothing happened. Rossi opened his eyes, gasping, checking his hands, his stomach. He was alive. Bumpy laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "There was no poison in the glass, you stupid son of a bitch. Silas swapped the bottle out before you even sat down. You just drank cheap scotch." Rossi stared, confused, humiliated, broken. He had begged for death over a glass of whiskey. "Get up," Bumpy commanded. Rossi stood, his legs jelly. "Leave Harlem," Bumpy said. "If I see you pass 110th Street again, I won't use poison. I'll use a rusty knife." Rossi ran. He didn't walk. He ran out of the Well Supper Club, leaving his dignity in a puddle on the floor. The ripple effect was instantaneous. By morning, the story was on every corner from Sugar Hill to Strivers Row. Bumpy Johnson hadn't just defeated an enemy, he had psychologically castrated him. The Genovese family got the message loud and clear. Harlem was not open for conquest. The tentative peace held for another 3 years. This incident at the Well Supper Club became a cornerstone of the Bumpy Johnson legend. It showcased the terrifying intellect that allowed a black man to rule the underworld during the height of segregation. Bumpy didn't just use violence, he used psychology. He understood that breaking a man's mind was far more permanent than breaking his legs. It reveals a fundamental truth about Bumpy. He was a chess master in a world of checkers players. While Rossi was thinking about bullets and poison, Bumpy was thinking about leverage, information, and theater. He protected his friend Nat not by firing a gun, but by orchestrating a play where he wrote the ending before the curtain even rose. The lesson here is timeless. True power isn't about the weapon you hold in your hand, it's about the information you hold in your head. Bumpy survived because he listened more than he spoke and planned 5 moves ahead of his enemies. If this story showed you why Bumpy was the smartest man in Harlem, hit subscribe. Drop a like if you respect the code. Comment below. Would you have called Bumpy's bluff? Next week, we dive into the night Bumpy Johnson kidnapped a police chief to save a neighborhood kid.